Welcome everyone to SportTechie, SportTechie's webinar on why flexibility in venues is more important than ever. I'm Dan Kaufman, SportTechie's Managing Director. Welcome, thank you for joining us. I'm gonna give everyone a few minutes to just trickle in, and then we'll get started with some operational notes and an introduction of our panelists. So a few logistics. We thank you for joining us. We want this to not just be a conversation between me and our panelists. We want this to be a conversation among our entire audience that's joining us on this webinar. And so I encourage you all to use the chat feature and to ask questions of the panelists. You can actually vote questions up that you really want to be answered that you see from other folks. And we will try to get to them throughout the conversation. So don't save your questions until the end. Send them in as we go along, and we'll get to them, hopefully all of them if we can. We really appreciate your participation. So, as I said, welcome. This is why flexibility in venues is more important than ever. It's a webinar that SportTechie is producing in partnership with Samsung. And I want to give each of our panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Don. Don, go ahead and introduce yourself. Don is President and CEO of PrismView, a Samsung electronics company.
Good morning, everyone. Don Szczepaniak. As Dan mentioned, I'm the President and CEO of PrismView, which is a large LED format manufacturer and an affiliate company of Samsung.
Thanks, Don. Brett, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan, and thank you everybody for attending. Good afternoon. My name is Brett Unzicker. I am a Vice President at Samsung Electronics America. I currently lead a team that is responsible for live events, entertainment, and spectaculars verticals. So live events, think sports, entertainment, think concerts, public speakers, and spectaculars, think about technology that you might see in Times Square or the Las Vegas Strip, things like that, and appreciate SportTechie for having us on. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hi, Jamie Galileo here, Senior Vice President of Facilities for Vivint Smart Home Arena in Salt Lake City, Utah, home of the Utah Jazz, and Smith's Ballpark, which is the AAA affiliate of the Los Angeles Angels at Anaheim. Great to be here.
Thank you, Jamie. Matt.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I oversee technology for the Las Vegas Raiders and Allegiant Stadium. I've been with the team for entering my 19th seasons, and I'm really excited to be able to build this venue and welcome the team and all of our fans to Las Vegas.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. One note for the audience as you're thinking about your questions. We're going to discuss a variety of things today, but I want to point out one thing that we can't discuss, quite frankly, and that is what we all think first of all, when we think live sports will come back in America at a large scale, but also what we think that will look like when we don't have fans or we have minimal amount of fans. So we'll all follow the guidance from our government authorities and from the league, and all of my panelists will have to follow that as well. And so we don't have confidence to talk about what that will look like. What we do have confidence in, though, however, is that eventually we'll get out of this and we'll get back to the point where we as a whole will feel comfortable going to large gatherings, going to stadiums, and enjoying the sporting experience as we all enjoyed for many years. So that's what we're going to talk about. When we do get out of this, why flexibility in venues is going to be more important than ever. And I'm really looking forward to discussing that with the four folks who are on this panel here. I'm going to start with an icebreaker, and I prepped the four guys about this, but one thing that I often think of when I think of stadiums and sports venues is I think of the awe and the inspiration that they often put inside of us when we see them from afar or when we enter them for the first time, particularly as children. And so I've asked all four of my panelists here to come up with a story that they remember from when they were a child, of a moment of awe that they can remember when seeing a stadium for the first time. Let's go in reverse order. Let's start with Matt.
Sure. So I actually never got to go to an NFL game until I was 19 years old. And now I attend them quite regularly, obviously. But still, I get a feeling in my chest and my gut when I enter a building and I feel the energy of the fans and I see the big video boards. So, look, I love it.
Thanks, Matt. Jamie.
Two memories come to mind. I was born in Montreal, Canada, and the two facilities I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, no longer exist, and one of the teams no longer exists. But the first is the Forum in Montreal, where the Montreal Canadiens hockey team played. That was a huge memory as a monster hockey fan in the day. And the second one was going to baseball games at a little park called Jerry Park, where the Montreal Expos played, and then moved over to the Olympic Stadium many years later. So very fond memories.
Thank you, Jamie. Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, so when I saw this question that you asked of us, I thought it was interesting in that I grew up outside of DC in Fairfax, Virginia. I was one of three boys, and my father, we were blessed enough that my father actually had tickets to every Redskins game at RFK on the field in the end zone. So these were bleacher seats, not in the stands. And as a little boy, it couldn't get any better. We were probably 5 yards from being able to touch the grass. The pylon was probably 10 yards away. And I remember vividly Art Monk catching a touchdown pass and sliding underneath our feet. They actually took a picture of it. And my older brother and I are on a football card with Art Monk jumping up with the ball. And we're standing there behind him with zebra pants on back in the 80s. And it was a trip, a great memories there. And another funny thing about that, just in the line of work that I'm in, that venue at the time didn't actually have any type of technology. It didn't have any video boards. So those were great seats when the action was on this end of the field, but when it was on the other end, you were listening to your headset with Frank Herzog and Sonny Jurgensen giving the play-by-play. So very, very different times.
Thank you, Brett. Don, can you top a story about zebra pants?
No, I cannot. Brett, it explains a lot about you. Zebra pants. My situation is pretty similar to Jamie's. I was 9 years old when I really was into my first, got to go to my first two major sporting events in two facilities that no longer exist: Old Comiskey Park in Chicago to see a White Sox game, and then the old Chicago Stadium to see a hockey game, to see the Blackhawks play. And my, I remembered this. I was 9 years old. My dad took me. We took the subway and the L. If you're familiar in Chicago, to the Comiskey Park. People loud. It was industrial, a lot of concrete, peeling paint. And then I remember walking through the tunnel and seeing that green field. And it's 50 years later, and I can still remember that emerald green field. It looked perfect, right? And it's still I get the same feeling whenever I walk through the tunnel onto a baseball field. That perfect green grass amid all the steel and concrete. And then when I went to the Blackhawks for the first time, same experience, right? The L, parking lots, the stadium was a big edifice of concrete. And but walking through the tunnel, it wasn't the sight, but it was the sound, this electric buzz. And that electric buzz for me symbolizes the difference between going to a game and watching the game on TV. You can have the best Samsung TV in your media room and watch the game, but you do not get the buzz and the electric feel of walking into a stadium with another 19 or 20,000 people.
Very well said. Thank you, Don. Matt, I'm going to jump to you to lead us off if I can. I think it'd be really interesting if you just gave us an update on the fantastic stadium that's being built, Allegiant Stadium, for the Raiders, and generally the move to Las Vegas. Where are you guys as far as the process of completing the stadium? What's the next stage? What are you really excited about right now? Sure.
Well, structurally, the stadium is complete. We are on schedule for a July 31 certificate of occupancy. where we get the keys to the building. And now it's all about fit and finishes. But if you drive up to the stadium, you see a complete building. They're working on some landscaping on the outside. They're working on some finishes on the inside. But we're ready to go. In terms of the team, we're just about ready to move the whole team down to Las Vegas. We've got a brand new practice facility in Henderson, Nevada. That same basic time frame on the construction. The structural part of the building is complete. In both buildings, my team is working to bring networks online. We're mounting video boards in both buildings. We're mounting screens throughout the building, and we're ready to turn things online and get started. So, depending on what happens with this COVID thing, we're ready to go and ready to play football games and bring the team to Southern Nevada.
Great. And tell me a little bit more, if you can, maybe just about, from a day-to-day perspective, maybe what's the top thing that you're working on today as it relates to the building or otherwise. I think that's interesting for the audience to hear kind of how our day-to-day operations have changed, or maybe not changed at all. It may still be relatively similar apart from the frequent video chats.
Well, my day-to-day operations have been not the same for the last 2.5 years getting these buildings online. So, but at the moment, our big focus is bringing the network online in both buildings. We've got our internet connectivity, and we're bringing network out to the edge in all those locations, and just turning things up and being ready for our Raider employees at our headquarters and our fans at the stadium.
And when you started the project, you mentioned 2.5 years ago, take us back, if you can, to some of the maybe unique challenges that moving to a city like Las Vegas gave you, and even some unique opportunities that it might have given you.
Sure. So it's funny. Las Vegas has turned out to be a much more dynamic market than we ever expected. I think as we moved down here and started working in this town, we realized what a dynamic market it is in terms of being the convention capital of the world. And we are more excited than we ever imagined to participate in that, because in addition to obviously hosting Raider games and concerts, our building's going to host, we're going to host conventions, right? And there's, countless conventions that come to town. And so many of them bring more than 30, 40, 50,000 people. And to this date, there hasn't been a venue in town that could host all those people in one place. And they've had to kind of multicast between different convention venues. And now we can put them all under one roof. And we're really excited to do that.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Jamie, I'm going to jump to you and then to Brett and Don as well. But I think, Jamie, what I'll ask you right now is just very quickly, give us an idea of your day-to-day, how that's changed over the past couple months as we've all been dealing with this, and how it might still be the same.
Well, our day-to-day is all of the events that we had on the calendar have been postponed. Everybody's acquainted with what's going on with the national leagues. So we're waiting to hear word. We're preparing. We're ready. But short of that, we're really basically like the entire industry, right in standby mode right now, trying to find out where we're headed. Great.
And Don and Brett, anything to add to that? How are you guys approaching it from the sense of working with these folks as customers? How are you approaching your day-to-day, and how has it changed given everything that's happened over the past few months?
Go ahead, Brett.
Sorry. I think that it's interesting. I think the elephant in the living room, I think for many of us, we're all working from home and balancing the act of a spouse and kids and everything else. I think a lot of people are facing that from a virtual sense. From professional standpoint, Samsung's obviously a very large company in this market, known for a lot of technology and displays. But as we look at what's to come, we've spent a considerable amount of time, energy, and resources coming out with solutions to adapt to the new world and what that might look like. So we're really energized to make sure that our great customers and partners like Matt and Jamie, as well as those listening on the phone, know that we have a lot more to offer to help in this unique environment that goes beyond just the board. So we've been spending a lot of time in that area and feel encouraged to help take an active part in bringing fans back to these venues.
Don?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've had this question asked of me before. In our particular business, we are so far out, meaning that, we started talking to the Raiders 2.5 years ago, about the stadium, and have been planning it for 2.5 years, have been building their LED for at least 6 months, and are installing it now right up through July. And so from a standpoint of day to day, it's interesting. If you walked into the Prism View factory, you wouldn't see much difference at all in activity, where, unlike some businesses which are much more, their sales cycle is shorter, and they're much more maybe retail focused, they've been impacted greatly. You wouldn't notice the difference. Our factory is humming. They got people going in, except when you walked in, you'd be temperature checked, you'd be given a mask, you'd be coached on social distancing. And so the impact for us is in how we do it. But from a standpoint of activity, we're really busy at the moment because we've got some really big, important customers, like Matt, where we're trying to finish their project in time for them to be ready for their opening days. So interesting times for us, right? Half my staff.
Hey, Don, you're doing a great job. I was in the stadium earlier this week, and we've got three, as you know, obviously we've got 3 big video boards in, and 2 of them are already in and complete, and we've got I see guys working on the 3rd one right now. So you nailed it, and we're going to be ready to roll.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and so for us, we're really busy. I think that if it's related to production, we're busy. Where you see the differences, as Brett mentioned, is my office team works from home. I've spent much more time on Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, and Google Meets meetings than I've ever had in my life before. But so half my day feels pretty normal, half the day feels pretty disruptive.
Great answer, Don. And Matt, I'm glad you jumped in, because I'd like to ask, and then we'll jump to Jamie after this. But Don and Matt, when you first were looking at Allegiant Stadium and you were thinking about video boards, you mentioned 3 or 4, I think, Matt, that and one that maybe is still set to be go live. Take us back to that thought process. How do you examine, when you're just kind of conceptualizing the venue itself? Don, what do you say to customers? And then take us through, I think it'd be really interesting to hear, how you work through the strategic ideas about placing a video board, whether indoor, outdoor, center hung, etc.
I'll start first, Matt. I think just because for us, in some ways, it can be very simple. Customers either have a very, very distinct vision of what they want, and it's our job to take that vision, bend, get as close to the limits of physics as possible when it comes to light and things like that, and deliver that vision, right? And so our job then, when the customer has a very, very distinct vision, is to turn that vision into reality, or to explain why it physically can't be done, and to offer alternatives. Sometimes the opposite occurs. The customer really is looking for our help, and that's where we can bring things that are creative and say, well, here's 5 or 6 options. The Raiders had a distinct vision, and frankly, I wouldn't change it change one bit of it. That stadium, I've said it before, I think is going to be instantly iconic. They've done a great job inside and out of delivering and spreading that vision throughout throughout the facility. And so our job there has been pretty simple: deliver on that vision. They want something to look the way that it looks. They want it to feel that way. Our job is to make that a reality. So for at least for the Raiders, like I said, our job was pretty simple. They had a nice, strong vision, and we just tried to help deliver it.
And one thing I'll just jump in real quick, Matt, before you comment.
No problem.
Matt, after you respond, Don, if you want to add anything about the difference between the approach that you took with Matt and building a whole new stadium, and then we'll jump to Jamie and talk about renovations and how you approach those two things differently, and also the distinction potentially between a stadium on Matt's side and an arena on Jamie's side.
Sure.
So we've been knowing this project was coming for years before we actually stuck a shovel in the ground. For probably 5 to 6 years before we started building in Las Vegas, we knew something was coming. And we started kind of our plan in terms of, obviously it all starts with the owner's vision for a building. And knowing this was coming, a lot of us with the team, we started traveling to all of the away games and going to different venues throughout the country and the world, really, as we did international games. And we started, taking notes, and we built a notebook on what we liked, what we didn't like, what we thought worked well, what didn't really translate. And so we kind of, you're right, we kind of built that vision, guided by our owner on what he wanted. And what's very important to him is the fan experience, and just feeling, getting what you can't get from watching, at home, and just getting that feeling in your chest of the excitement of a Raider game. And so while we wanted to have, we wanted to wow you with technology, we don't want to put technology at the forefront, right? So Don and his team did a really good job on working with us so that, look, you can have this amazing 4K video board to watch, and it's part of the venue, but it's not the most important thing, right? The most important thing is the football on the field and the grass field that we're putting in Allegiant Stadium. But at the same time, you need to look up and be able to see that replay on an incredibly crisp 4K screen like you do at home. So it's kind of a balance, and I think we've achieved that.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Or I guess, Don, did you want to add anything there about the varying approaches when it comes to a new stadium entirely versus, listen to Jamie and renovation for a stadium?
Yeah, so and Jamie is the expert on this, but I will say this: a lot of the same things that happen, from a renovation standpoint. The difference is that you have the four walls usually don't change, right? The stadium size is the stadium size, but I think there's another distinct difference, and that's integration. One of the things why I'm so pleased that both Jamie and Matt have joined us is because I think they're two very different approaches, but achieve the same goal. Vivint Stadium or Vivint Arena, we did the first major work there in terms of partnership on the center run. Was that 2013, Jamie?
Yeah.
Something, right? And there's been a continuous modification and improvement since then, virtually every year. And when you think about that, the best stadiums, the best solutions, both are technology forward, but also are iconic. And what I mean by that is they don't look dated. I would bet, well, I said this just yesterday, we had an executive from another NBA franchise who is looking to renovate to build a new stadium. And when he talked about things, stadiums, center hungs he liked and center hungs he didn't, he mentioned Utah as one that he loved because it was so technology fresh. And I laughed because it's probably one of the older center hungs in the league, but they really hit that note right. Something that was at the time technology forward, iconic, and remained remained relevant and not dated. When we talk about flexibility, that is a form of flexibility, being able to put something in that you know will work from today and 10 years from now. And I think Jamie's done a good job in the various integrations afterwards of making sure that everything new that gets put in that stadium integrates and feels connected to the old. It's not a patchwork or quilt. It is a single vision that just happens to be done in stages.
Jamie, go ahead and add to that. And I think in particular, I'd really like to get a sense of your mindset when you first maybe started talking to Don or started thinking about the changes that you wanted to make. And even if you can give an example of like the prior technology that was there or the lack of technology that was there, and then what you wanted and what you got.
Well, the first thing we started when we did the remodel, and our IT team was leading the way on the technology front, was respecting the brand and not doing something to the building that would take away from its status as an icon downtown. It was built in 1991 when the downtown area wasn't what it is today. This is the story of many cities. And Larry and Gail Miller, who own the Jazz, built the building in roughly 15 months because they were moving out of an old Memorial Stadium across the street. So when it came time to remodel the building, we needed to be very, very careful, very respectful, respecting the brand, the history, because the building meant a lot to everybody in the community. I mean, the Jazz is the team for Utah. So when our IT team went out looking for technology partners, we already had a relationship with Samsung through our center hung and our LED, and an integrator just up the road had put our IT team together with the Samsung folks, and we were looking at a more cloud-based, IP-based, SOC-based system that could be very flexible, but not take away from what we were trying to do architecturally. It almost needed to sit in the background and be very user-friendly and respectful, but not overwhelming. And I think our IT folks and our technology folks did an amazing job of doing that and dovetailing those things together, making sure that, yes, we refreshed the building, that it became more technology advanced and flexible, but respecting the past and the history.
Thank you, Jamie. We've got some good questions coming through, and I want to try to get a couple in right now. There's an audience question from David Michael, and I'll put it to you, Jamie, and then I think Matt would be great to get your answer on this. It says, with 5G becoming a reality, is it still worth installing Wi-Fi in stadiums? How are you guys approaching that, Jamie, if you are at all?
I would say that, number one, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question to, but let me just tell you what we have. So during the remodel, we put in a brand new Wi-Fi system. That system is being used all the time. It works phenomenally well. We also had installed, just prior to that, a distributed antenna system for all of our cell phone carriers. So our DAS system is a neutral host DAS system. It's very flexible. We have spectacular coverage. And more importantly, we have great bandwidth during a game for all 4 carriers. So that was really important. We accomplished that prior to the remodel. Then during the remodel, we had the discussion, is Wi-Fi really that important? And the answer was yes, it was. And this is 2 years ago, technology changes a lot. So we elected to put in effectively a distributed antenna system for our Wi-Fi, and we use it to this day. We just had our first discussions with the 5G implementation with one of the carriers, but I can tell you that as far as coverage goes, bandwidth, and performance, our patrons, I don't believe, see any issues when they're attending, whether it's a basketball game, concert, or a convention.
Thanks, Jamie. Matt, go ahead, and then I have a question for you specifically that I'll add on to it. But go ahead if you'd like to touch.
Sure. Look, connectivity is something I live every day. Connectivity is it's like hot water or running water. It's a utility. It's a public utility, and you've got to have it. You must have both Wi-Fi and 4G and 5G because however the patron wants to connect, you need to support that. And look, 5G is coming out and it's an emerging technology at the moment. All the carriers do it a little bit different, and it gets classified kind of for marketing as 5G, but the technologies are a little bit different through all the carriers. And as they work to figure that out, and as the cell phone manufacturers kind of settle in on what the current technology is, you've got to shift to support that. But in the meantime, what's funny is what doesn't get talked about is there's a really great technology that just emerged and is already on most people's phones, and that's Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax. And that greatly improves Wi-Fi in high density situations, which is the perfect, the stadiums and arenas are the perfect venue to support and show that. Essentially, the technology is that you're using the same frequencies. Phones get on, do their business, and get off the network quicker than ever before. So in a very high density situation like a stadium or arena, Wi-Fi 6 screams. And so we're opening with a Wi-Fi 6 network, and we're also working with the carriers to put in 5G. However, whatever flavor they want to do it, again, that stuff's different for each carrier. But absolutely, you've got to have both, and we're excited to open with both.
Great, thank you, Matt. There's a question that came through, and the question reads like this, but I think it's a good segue into what I want to talk about next. The question is, are any venues looking at hosting non-sporting events to generate revenue? And I assume the question is specific to right now, right? So during when we're not having live sporting. But I think the question is also one that should be thought of more broadly. And when we talk about flexibility, and when we talk about multi-use venues, I'm wondering, I think I'll probably kick it off to Don or Brett to kind of start us off here and tell us from Samsung's perspective, from Prism View's perspective, what's the importance of a multi-use venue, and how do you approach that when you're thinking about some of the technology that you like to implement?
Don, you want me to take that one? I can take it. So yeah, I think I think it's a great question, and I think probably Dan, when you asked us to be on this panel, I think that's probably the idea behind the panel. I think it's a really really pertinent question when you think about these venues, a venue or a stadium. They cost billions of dollars to construct or to renovate. They cost millions of dollars to then operate. So whether it's basketball at 41 games or whether it's football. Matt, I'm not sure how many games you guys have since you have two teams playing there, but you're talking about a limited number of games, a limited number of days where you're driving revenue. So the question really becomes, what do you do with the other 300 plus days of the year that you don't have a sporting event there? And the answer is just what was said, is it's something else. It could be a public speaker, it could be a conference, it could be a concert. And I think that one of the beauties of what we try to do with the technology is ensure that, somebody could go with a group of their friends on a Friday night and go see the concert of their dreams at a particular venue. And then through the use of digital technology as well as other smart technology, overnight, you can actually change the entire experience inside that venue and set it up to cater towards a game the next day. So that's really kind of the idea behind this is, how do you use technology to make sure that you don't have 300 dark days a year, but that you have 300 additional opportunities to generate revenue?
Brett hit it right on the head with that, because listen, you're right. These buildings are extremely expensive, and it's just not economically feasible. We've got 10 home games a year for the Raiders. We're going to host probably 6 home games for UNLV, but that's 16 days out of 365, and it's just not economically feasible to only use the building for those days. So of course you're going to have concerts in Las Vegas. We're going to host conventions, and we're building I believe we're building an iconic building, and we're also building a tour program. People are going to come to Vegas as a great visitor town that it is, and we're going to have a tour program that operates all the rest of the days of the year when we're not hosting big events, concerts, and football games. So And to Brett's point, look, we've got to be able to, on a day's notice, or not even a day's notice, but we just have to have this building programmed for different events. So we will have we're obviously going to have a Raiders program. We're going to have a UNLV program. We're going to have a concert program, which will change with whoever the concert is, and then we'll have a tour program. And having the building program and the flexibility to switch those programs with just a few mouse clicks is it's huge.
Hey, Matt, there's one thing. Sorry, Dan, if I'm taking over your role here with this question.
No, go ahead.
I think, Matt, there's something about your stadium that I'm not sure all the audience knows. When you talk about UNLV and you talk about the Raiders, there's probably a piece of technology that people aren't aware of when it simply comes down to the fields they're playing on. Do you want to talk to them about that?
Yeah. So, look, the Raiders are going to play on natural grass. We have a retractable field that will spend most days, 355 days roughly, out in the southern Nevada sunshine, growing natural grass. But for Raider games, we're going to slide that field in and play on natural grass for the Raiders. UNLV will play on turf. We'll be able to put a basketball field if we host NCAA events. I'm sure we've got an ice program if we ever do hockey. But yeah, that field slides in and out. Actually, Jamie was gracious. We use some of the same seating technology in our buildings, and Jamie was gracious to host us a couple of times to learn how to move retractable, deconstructable, removable seats around. So I want to give him a shout out and a thanks for that. But yeah, we're really excited. We're doing natural grass indoors for 10 to 12 games a year. And we'll have, turf and cement floor for concerts.
Listen, that's a great point, Matt. It's funny. I've been sitting here smiling because, this is the core of this discussion. Flexibility, technology has enabled flexibility much different than the first time. I grew up in the dark ages of stadiums, multi-purpose stadiums, right? There was a time, pick a city: Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Seattle, Houston. These what I would call the dark ages. They were multi-purpose, and what they mean by multi-purpose and flexible was we could do football and we could do baseball, and we could do neither of them very well. And so there was something very common about them. There were these big, huge, boring looking edifices in the middle of a sea of concrete, and you drove there, you watched the game, and then you got the heck out as fast as you could. And the experience was not great in either ways. The difference between those multi-use stadiums of the past, which by the way are almost all gone, which is pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And what's happening today is technology is enabling flexibility in a much different way, right? And so instead of trying to do two different things and not doing either well, the stadiums are very purpose-built for sports. But technology, this ability to have an electronic digital canvas, the ability to have the technology to move a field in and out, really allows for the stadiums to feel purpose-built for whatever event is there. And that's a huge difference, and technology is enabling that. Our piece of it, the LED piece of it, is one piece. We like to think of it's an important piece, but it's just one piece of how technology has enabled true flexibility for stadiums versus that version of 30 years ago or 40 years ago when it was really try to shoehorn a couple different sports into the same kind of ugly building.
It's well said, and I've got a good question that came through here I want to share with you guys, and I'm not sure who I'm going to point it to first, but we'll see if anyone thinks at it. The question is from Ian Redpath, and Ian says, what objective measures do you use to evaluate the right level of technology for each stadium and each sport? And is there ever too much disruption from tech from a fan experience perspective? I'm curious about the research and process you use to establish that. Any volunteers, or do I have to call on someone?
I'll give it a shot.
Go for it, man.
Kind of look, I'm a technologist, right? And I want to build great technology, but and I wish I could attribute this quote to somebody, but somebody just told me and I went into a building, and I won't say which one, but they told me, man, they just over-teched it, and we're here to watch a football game, not be on our phones. And that stuck with me, right? And it's also a vision of our owner. He wants this Raider fan experience to be one that's about the football game. And so one of the technologies that we looked at when building buildings was, hey, you want to have 32 replays on your phone. And as a technologist, you think about that and you go, that would be cool. But in reality, do I want 60,000 people like just sitting there on their phone doing this? No, I want them engaged with what's going on the field. So, it, kind of came from research and going around the league and coming to different buildings and looking at games and going, well, look, we want to support technology in to the best ability that we can. And we've got to compete with those, 85-inch Samsung screens that everybody's got on their wall these days. But at the same time, I want them to come out to our building. So how do we do that? And kind of what we came with is listen, we want your main focus on the field, but we want you to look up and be able to see that replay. And we've got a great production staff who's going to put the best replay possible on that screen for you. And we've got super fast connectivity, whether it's 5G or Wi-Fi 6, so that if you want to order a burger or order a beer on your phone and get it quickly, you can take your phone out of your pocket, do your business, and put it back. But we want you engaged in what's going on the field, and we think that's what's the best part about coming to a Raider game is the overall production, from the football action on the field to the best replay you can get.
Yeah, and I'll take a little bit slightly different twist on that, Dan. I agree with everything that you said, but I think at the end of the day, the challenge that we all face is getting fans out of their living room and into the venues. And I think that all of us are going to have a serious competitor in the living room in the coming months ahead. But when you look at that, you're in your living room, sitting on your comfortable couch. You've got a great high definition TV image, the best seat in the house, and you're 3 feet from your bathroom with no line, and you can reach a beer or a Coke at a moment's notice with no line. So that's the environment that we're competing in, and we're really leveraging technology that's where you don't over-tech it, but that it enhances that experience to compete with the living room. So we're doing things like making sure that we can articulate with displays where the shortest wait time is, where the shortest line to the bathroom is. How do you get people there? And then how do you route them into their seats? So then when they sit there, they have the best view in the house. They have that best experience because, if you look at Jamie's venue, the people sitting courtside have a very different experience and vantage point towards watching a replay than somebody who's sitting up in the 400 section. So making sure that you take all of those things into account and use the technology in a smart way that enhances the fan experience and gets them out of their living room, I think is the most important thing, to not over-tech it, to think about the fan and their experience first.
Brett, you mentioned one thing that I want to hit on a little bit, I think, and that's the movement and flow throughout the stadium. And earlier in our prep call, you mentioned that there were some things that Samsung was doing around that, and I'd be interested if you wanted to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it actually, I think when we were chatting, the conversation had started around safety. And I guess the premise around this is the world has changed. We know it. We all want to come back to live events. We all are on this call because we love live events. We love sports, love concerts. But it's going to be harder to get people back. And we have spent a considerable amount of time developing solutions that will help gain visitors' confidence back, that they can come back and do so safely. So as an example, one of the things that we've come out with that we're talking to our customers and partners about is this temperature sensing, and it tracks people throughout the venue. So basically, from the moment that you park your car outside of a stadium, when somebody gets out of their car through thermal sensors, we can actually check their temperature. We do this in an unobtrusive fashion. They don't even know it's happening. There's no personally identifiable data that's captured. All we need is a mobile device that has a radio in it, so NFC, Bluetooth, or Wi-Fi, and we can then track that person's movement from the parking lot all the way into the stadium or venue. Now that does a few things. For people like Matt and Jamie, it allows them the data to know if there's a cluster of people, say, that have a temperature. And then it's up to them what they want to do with that data. We're not going to say what they have to do with it, but they have the information. So they could either talk to the guest about whether or not they should be there. They could actually reroute traffic patterns around a cluster of people that might have a fever. But beyond that safety aspect and giving people, peace of mind that they can come back, we can also now track some interesting things around consumer behavior once they're there, because I would argue that when they do come back to venues, the experience for them is going to be different too, and we don't know what that looks like. So we're going to be able to leverage this technology to know, okay, in this new world, does somebody spend more time in their stands in the 100 section because they're 6 feet apart from the next person, or in the 400 section where we've done something slightly different? How long do they stand in front of a particular area? Is one gift shop more attractive than another? When they're in that gift shop, if they steal something, we know who they are and where they went. We don't know who they are, but we know where they went. So we're doing some really interesting things around that type of technology from a safety perspective. We're also doing some things with technology where a different technology utilizing artificial intelligence to track movement and basically route people out of a venue in the safest possible fashion. Now, where this really comes into play is, God forbid, there's an emergency. Say there's an active shooter, a fire, a bomb. We hope these things don't happen, but we've got to prepare, right? What will happen in that scenario is, through artificial intelligence, it will actually blank out all the displays in the building and redirect people with the schematic layout of the building to the safest possible location and route them around what that hazard might be. So those are just two examples of technology that we're coming out with to help with this new world that all of us are forced to operate in, and hopefully bring the fans back sooner and make them feel more comfortable.
It's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that, Brett. I'm going to jump to another audience question. This is from David Michael. David says, many sports player tracking systems, so systems of tracking athlete movement, require proprietary and complex infrastructure stadium installations. Does the panel see any emerging standards which would avoid the need to install multiple systems? Any volunteers for that one? Matt?
Sure, I'll take that. I just,
Go ahead, Jamie.
for a quick clarification, is the person asking the question about what the leagues are doing for their players, or is this a third-party technology?
David, if you're listening, go ahead and message if you want clarity there. But Jamie, maybe you can answer from your perspective as a member of the league.
So the NBA has obviously camera systems within the building that allow them to look at player performance and retain statistical data. Baseball does the same thing. I don't know about NFL, but those systems, when they were installed, were quite frankly very easy. We're talking about some IP cameras that were installed on the catwalk, tied into a network switch, and then we routed them to a common point. So it was relatively easy, literally a day and a half install time, and we've had no issues. Those systems have been improved over time, specifically on the front end, and I'm sure the cameras have gotten a lot better. But I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Sure, I'll take it a little bit as well. Yeah, there's multiple. There's, as Jamie mentioned, there's the camera systems. Frankly, I'm glad that we're doing this as we're building the building and not having to go back to do it later, just in terms of routing all the fiber and all those things. And then there's also RF technologies, that go into, player shoulder pads and whatnot. So we take our lead from the NFL. Obviously, the NFL is very concerned about parity, as they should be, so that all teams are tracking kind of the same thing. So we take our lead from them. But yeah, the two as Jamie mentioned, there's the camera technology and then there's the RF.
Thank you, guys. I think I want to jump to specific to Prism View, Don, and I'm curious how you might approach an outdoor LED board versus an indoor LED board, and some of the differences in the technology there. Is there a difference? Talk to me a little bit about when you strategize for that, in particular, whether or not there has to be a different technology that's used outside, or if that matters or not.
Yeah, so basically, when it comes to outdoor versus indoor, the biggest difference, there's a couple. There's two big differences. One of them is brightness, because outdoor the sun often is except in Seattle and Chicago these days. The sun often is directly overhead. It is the brightest thing in the solar system. So the technology and everything from the diodes you use to what you drive has to drive at a much higher rate. So a typical outdoor board, we have to drive 7,000, 8,000 nits, one of the measurements we use. On the indoor side, that's probably 1/6, 1/7 of the brightness, because on the indoor side, you're controlling lighting, you're controlling the venue itself is dimmer because the sun's not there, and so that's one of the differences. So the diodes you use and the circuitry you use to drive power is one of the big differences. The second one is obviously is on the outdoor side, rain, wind, snow, the dust, those things are much more prevalent. And so you have to design the technology, you have to design the boards to withstand that. In places like Florida, you got to design it so it can withstand 110 mile-an-hour winds, because once in a while there's a hurricane in Florida. The interesting thing, which is interesting because of Matt being on the call, is the stadiums like the new Allegiant Stadium, where it's outdoor, kind of. It's outdoor, but there's a roof. The roof is not necessarily opaque, right? So it's translucent. So you have some of the effects of sun and wind and rain, but not all of them. For that case, we just simply assume that the stadium has no roof, and so from a standpoint of the Raiders, the outdoor product is no different than what we put in the Chicago Bears as an example of the Ravens. But it does bring up an interesting point for in the future. Is there a product in between that might get developed that gets some of the indoor capabilities and some of the outdoor capabilities, but not all of them, because of the fact that the product doesn't have to withstand the same kinds of factors as an outdoor product.
Thank you, Don. We've got a bunch of questions coming through. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, but thank you to the audience for your engagement. And we've got about 7 more minutes here. So I've got a question, and there's been a couple questions that are like this, but I'm going to read the one from Peter Fleming. Peter says, do you think sound technologies have kept up with the huge advances in video technology? How do you value the impact of sound on the fan experience relative to other elements employed in the venue? Matt or Jamie, do you want to touch on how you guys are approaching sound versus video?
Sure. I'll talk at least a bit about the arena. We have a small AAA park too, but really comes down to intelligibility. Can you understand what the announcer is saying? Who got that foul? Was that a 3-pointer? All sorts of things that you want to know, information you want during the game. Music, as long as it's not, too echoey and it sounds good, is great. But the number one fan complaint is intelligibility of the announcer and the information that he's providing. And I think that's gotten way better in the sound technology side and speaker driving and line array technologies. The issue generally on older buildings and older arenas specifically is how they were constructed and their ability to absorb sound. So there's kind of two sides to that.
Plus, it's also a balance because, listen, you want the loudest stadium or arena in your league, right? So you want to encourage fans to yell and scream and clap right? For and be loud on defense, but at the same time, you need to deliver, as Jamie said, the information on the game, so that the fans can hear it. So it's almost an engineering and sound direction thing more than making it loud.
Very interesting. Thank you, guys. This question came in from the audience, but it's also a question that we had jotted down ahead of time. In fact, one that we had posted on the webinar page, and that's the concept of, what can venue operators do right now during this time to kind of prepare for the moment when live sports comes back in full, not just from a sports standpoint, but also from an entertainment standpoint. We talked about different uses, but I don't know if any of our panelists want to add a little bit more to that. Brett, Don, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think I personally believe that everybody wants to come back. I think we all know that this country wants people to come back, and it's going to happen. Right now, I think that we're in some challenging times where some people are a little shy to make investments. But I believe that if people don't make investments on infrastructure to operate events differently, they're going to be behind the curve. And so I think that we should really start thinking about, what does that fan experience look like? What are the types of things that you need to get them to come back, to feel safe? How can you also give them a better experience, because the competition with the living room is going to be even harder? And then I think the last thing is, once the fans are in, I think it's really changing gears from fan experience into how do you turn a profit on that? What are you doing to generate revenue there that you didn't do before? Is it things like programmatic advertising, where you kind of press the easy button, let your marketing folks not worry about that and do it in a programmatic fashion that's automated, because you might have limited staff. But I think these are the types of things that we should be thinking about: enhancing the fan experience because the competition is going to be more fierce, making sure that they feel safe enough to come back, and then when you get them back, because we will. When we get them back, how do we drive revenue? So those would be the things that I would say people should be focusing on during this bizarre off season that we're all kind of forced to live in right now.
Yeah, I think to add to Brett's comments, I think we talked about this earlier. These facilities, they're not made for today. We're experiencing not just for today. They're made to operate for decades, right? 20, 30 years. And so I think we do have to take kind of a long-term view. What's happening today, this month, this 6 months, there's a variety of, there's a lot of smart people trying to figure out how to make those things work. And as we talked about at the beginning, we're not going to talk about that because I think that is it's vitally important. But in the life of the new Allegiant Stadium, it's going to be a blip. But the lasting impacts going forward 5, 10, 15 years, for me, the litmus test is how do we take what the fans are looking for, use technology to make whatever we do for them, whether that's wayfinding, safety, make it effortless, right? The lack of effort is another aspect of flexibility. How do you continue to evolve your stadium to give the fans what they need in 5 years, which we may have some clues, we may not today, but how do we do that to make sure that technology is used to make their experience there effortless? Because if it's effortless, that's another way to compete with the living room couch, right? And so for me, that's that litmus test. Continue looking at technology. How do we implement it in a way that the fan doesn't notice it, but feels the impact of it?
That's well said. And I'm going to end there because I think it's a good spot. And we've reached the hour. Don, Brett, Matt, Jamie, thank you for taking the time. To our audience members, thank you for being here. This has been recorded. It'll live on SportTechie.com if anyone wants to rewatch it. You'll also find all of our other information, including other webinars there. Best way to stay up to date on SportTechie things is to subscribe to the SportTechie newsletter. Thank you to you all. Thank you to Samsung for supporting this. Have a great afternoon.
Thank
This
you.
was fun. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.